Hello everyone, welcome to the spoiler talk of Ant-Man and the Wasp, and let me just start off by saying the fingering of Ghost is comparable to Eve in Superman. When she takes a picture with all the sensitive documents, that is what I meant. It's like Janet just puts her fingers on the side of Ghost's head and just fixes her. And it's like, that is so dumb. That is actually dumb. I hate that. I really do. But let's get into the movie then, shall we? So it starts off with, obviously, Hank telling Hope about what really happened when they had to leave for their final mission where her mom didn't come back from. And apparently a missile was shot. And they had to go onto the missile, but they couldn't disable it without going, like, subatomic. However, Hank's regulator was broken, so Janet decided to do it, and that's why she vanished. However, because of the fact that Scott came back, maybe there's a chance that Janet is alive as well. And there we go. The setup for the movie. So now we are gonna build a quantum tunnel. So that during house arrest, Scott is playing a break-in game, I guess you could say that, and trying to steal a trophy that says world's greatest grandma. However, he crashes in the escape through the fence with his leg, causing the feds to arrive because obviously he's in house arrest, and once he leaves house arrest, he actually has to be checked up on to see if he's not doing anything nefarious, because he's not allowed to be in contact with either Hope or Hank because they are criminals as well because of the fact that they built the suit that Scott used. But obviously nothing is wrong with Scott. He's just been doing magic tricks, which who wants to do, which is like, I hope you get it one day. So then Scott goes to have a bit of a bath. However, then he has a bit of a weird vision and a weird flashback thing of Janet actually with Hope, a younger Hope. So he calls up Hank with like a burner phone, I guess, and he's like, I have an issue. I was your wife. Not like that. I didn't do anything weird, but I was your wife, and it was just strange. Anyway, maybe this is just maybe my head is just going crazy. Maybe I shouldn't have called. And then he breaks the phone and then he goes downstairs in order to eat. Also, him and the buddies have made a company called XCOD Security, and they are basically a security company now. However, they need to start the business and they have a big client that they need to sell to, and that is basically the plot of the buddies in this movie, or at least like the tension for the buddies. So then Scott is sitting on the couch eating some breakfast, and there's an annoying wasp flying about, but he doesn't really care. He keeps eating. He gets stung by the wasp, which he still doesn't necessarily care about. He continues to eat. However, then he falls down and he's in a car with Hope, and he's in a mini car, which I actually like that. However, she's not happy with him because of the whole Germany situation. So then he's scared, but apparently there's a giant ant who basically copies his routine, because apparently Hope and Hank have been keeping an eye on Scott the entire time. So then Hope takes Scott to Hank, which apparently is in this building where they're building a quantum tunnel. Hank is also very disappointed in Scott as well, the disappointing dad, like I said. However, we need to get a specific part in order to finish the quantum tunnel. So we gotta go to the black market of a guy named Sonny, and this is where I said that Sonny works only in the opening, and then afterwards it's just like it feels too stuffed. Like if this was Sonny's only scene, I would have been fine with it. So then we leave the building. Scott gets some clothes. We shrink the building down. It even has a roller, which I thought was absolutely funny, dude. I've heard those things could be great for your back. But I also don't really understand how all of this works, because isn't that still supposed to be a building? Like, how are you able to carry it around? But that same thing was like the question that I kind of had. I don't even know if I said it. Like I said, recorded the spoiler talk for Ant-Man last year, so I don't remember. But the tank. It's like Hank carries a tank around, but like, is that thing still the weight of a tank? Because when Scott shrinks, he punches people. He has the weight of like an actual punch. Because if something that small hits you, it's not really gonna hurt you. People don't go flying because they get hit like that, you know? So does that still have the weight of a building? Is Hank just that strong? And so the vehicle as well. But they take the building with them. They go meet up with Sonny. However, Ghost is following them as well. However, Sonny knows about the fact that Hope is, well, Hope, because they've been using a cover name. And then obviously he wants tech and all that stuff in order to sell to the highest bidder. However, she's like, no. She leaves, puts on the Wasp outfit, takes out everyone, gets the part. However, then Ghost shows up, who then fights her, and obviously you can't fight back. And Scott is entirely jealous about the fact that he doesn't have wings or blasters as well. And I understand the wings, you know, you're Ant-Man. No need for wings. But like, blasters would have been nice. Also, earlier about the suit that Scott wore in Civil War, Hank is like, did you destroy the suit? And Scott's like, yeah, I did. I can't believe it destroyed my suit. That'll come back into play later on. But Scott gets a new suit that is a bit haywire-y, which is why Wasp does most of the fighting instead of Ant-Man, because, you know, he has a suit that doesn't necessarily work. His suit is mainly here for comedy purposes. So we get the part back. We are earning ourselves a good old W, but then Ghost goes over to Hank, puts her arm through Hank's neck in order to, you know, because she's phasing and stuff like that. Give me the building or I will kill you. So she takes the building and we need the squad, baby. Yes, the squad is back just as great as in the first movie. God, I miss these people in the third one. The third one is such a downgrade, mainly because these three idiots aren't even in the movie. At least Luis isn't in the movie. I hate that. He is such a gem. However, we can't really track the thing, which I actually found funny because, like, we need to track the building, but we can't. And then Luis is like, well, we have some great trackers available right now. It's like, dude, really? No, now's not the time. But we could maybe get the help of someone else called Bill Foster. So we head over to him in school, and he basically tells us that we need a part from the older suits that Hank doesn't use anymore. So we need an older suit. Also, the FBI arrives, but we are able to escape them. That's very good. But Scott's then like, well, actually, I kept an old suit. So he calls over to Luis, which also, by the way, he's like, I mailed it to Luis. You put my suit through the mail? The postal service is good, okay? But the trophy isn't there because Cassie took the trophy. And so we need to head over to school. So we head over there. We get inside the school, but then the suit goes haywire and we get like medium Scott throughout the rest of this, which is actually funny as well. And they make some good jokes about that. Almost had it. Come on, just a little bit higher. And it's like, I thought that Wasp was very funny in this sequence. But we get the old suit. We get the part that we need and we find the base. Also, Ghost has a machine to stabilize her in order because of her phasing stuff. So we head over there. However, we get caught, even though I thought that was kind of stupid because, to be honest, one of you should have kept an eye on Ghost while the other one takes the building. But hey, maybe that's just me. Also, that is a strong desk to be able to hold up a building. But like I said, I don't understand how this works. It seems like it works the way that they want to, which can be a bit annoying. But anyway, they get caught. Hank also got caught, and it turns out that Bill was actually working with Ghost. By the way, Bill in the comic books is a hero called Goliath. I think he's a hero. Anyway, but he becomes bigger, and then they have a size competition at school as well, which also was a bit funny. But anyway, he works with Ghost in order to help her stabilize, and they basically want to use Janet's energy in order to be able to stabilize Ghost. However, Hank obviously thinks that that's gonna kill Janet, so that's not a good idea. However, Hank should have just been like, dude, just help me get Janet back, and the three of us can work together in order to fix Ghost. You know, that's what he should have done. But he doesn't even offer that until way later on in the movie, which I did find a little bit annoying. It's like, okay, now you were like, I'll help you with Ghost once I get my wife back. It's like, you could have said that back then, okay? Also, we learned that S.H.I.E.L.D., or maybe Hydra, used Ghost as a stealth operative. And I'm like, oh, so why wasn't she in running for Avengers? Like, we have all these people for Avengers. She could have helped too, you know? S.H.I.E.L.D. had her. Why wasn't she part of it? Also, back in the day, Hank got Ghost's dad to be fired and also discredited, according to Hank later on, because he tried to steal stuff. However, the dad continued on the work basically at home. However, he took too many risks, and that is how Ghost got her powers. So then Hank fakes a heart attack, and it's like there's this box of like mints, quote unquote, which Scott wanted a mint earlier, but he wasn't allowed to. But apparently there's like ants in there that become bigger, and that's how we're able to escape and take the lab back. Yes, we got it. So we get to a secret location in the forest, and we try everything out. However, at this point also, Luis needs Scott's location because of the fact that there are plans that he needs to sign off on and also potentially improve. However, Birch then arrives, and he's back, and it's like, why are you back? Like, the beginning scene was fine. You didn't need to come back, but he's back, and he needs to get the location. Then we get the joke about Truth Serum, and we get the whole big backstory, which I thought was actually very, very funny. However, eventually, Birch gets the info. However, I liked that it's like, where is Scott Lang? Well, he's actually, you know, he's not in a good place, you know. I mean, everything that has happened, you know, he lost the woman that he liked, you know, he's not in a good place emotionally. But where is he physically? I thought that was funny. It's like, he's in a bad place emotionally. Oh, he's in the forest. And then Ghost comes in. It's like, where? It's like, hey, they're in the forest. Like, okay. So Ghost got the location now. So then later on, also earlier, we learned that Ghost had a couple of weeks left to live. So Sonny decides to call the feds to deal with this whole thing because he has a man on the inside. Of course, every criminal does. Meanwhile, at the lab, Janet takes over Scott's body and fixes the tunnel, which was also funny. The fact that Janet and Hank are actually acting kind of romantically with each other. You know, they hold hands, they look lovingly into each other's eyes. But the problem is it's Scott. So that makes it funny. But she gives them the exact location because apparently what Janet did was she put an antenna in Scott's head so that she could eventually take over in order to give the location so she could come back. However, they have 2 hours to get her. So then once Scott is back, Luis calls him and is like, yo, the cops are on the way, Ghost is on the way, Birch is on his way, everyone is coming, and it's just not a good day. So then everyone once again becomes mad at Scott. You know, Hank and Hope aren't happy about that kind of stuff. So Scott decides to take the suit and in order to rush home in order to be able to get back before the feds arrive, which he does. However, Cassie is able to block Jimmy long enough for Scott, I guess, to get into the bathroom because he is supposed to be sick. That is what I call a fantastic daughter. However, when Hope and Hank want to leave, they shrink the building and they're just surrounded by cops. So they get arrested. So Scott decides to rescue Hank and Hope because he learns about that, and he does. And also, while Hank and Hope got arrested, Ghost killed the corrupt cop guy and stole the building. So we need to get it back, but this time we have a tracker. We got big arrows in the sky. But Hank is going to jump. That is the new plan because of the fact that Ant-Man and the Wasp need to take care of all of the baddies. So Hank will go inside. And yeah, that is the plan. But first we need to lure the bad guys outside. So we have ants inside, be able to disconnect everything so that they can come outside. At least, you know, Ghost comes outside. She fights a bit with Ant-Man, who pretends to be in danger, but he's not really. It's just a ruse, as magic tricks usually go. You gotta distract everyone. While with one hand you put up the middle finger to the crowd, with the other hand you are creating something new. And it's like, wow, magic! So Hank is like, look, man, once I get Janet back, we'll fix the Ghost as well. And he goes inside of the quantum realm. However, then the building shrinks and we get the building out of there, and then we get a bit of a chase because of the fact that Birch is also here. So now we get the big car chase that was also in the trailer, the flipping of cars, and I very much enjoyed this chase because of the fact that, you know, the whole big and small thing. Love that in this movie. But also we pass hands with the building, which also causes Hank to miss his point, so he needs to recalibrate and also almost gets killed. But he eventually recalibrates, gets to the location. However, then he needs to wait for Janet, who he can't find, and then time's up and he starts to have these weird visions. But then Janet fixes him by putting her fingers on the side of his head, and he's now fixed completely. They go back inside, but now they have to wait for the building to become big because the building is either in the hands of the Squad, or it's in the hands of Sonny, or it's in the hands of Ghost. That's basically the trilogy where the building goes from one to the other, to the other, to the other in that sense. However, it ends up eventually in Birch's hands. However, Birch doesn't have the remote in order to be able to make the thing big and small, which is still in the van with Luis. So Luis, he opens up the Hot Wheels case and he's like, oh man, this cool car is cool. So he drives off in this cool car, goes small, really fun. Birch also escapes by boat, and it's like, how was he able to buy a ticket that fast? I also like how in this movie, by the way, they make fun of what they do in Marvel movies, which is they put on a baseball cap and like sunglasses and they're invisible, which I find funny because Scott was like, we just look like ourselves at a baseball game. But Ant-Man then decides to become super gigantic and swim over in order to get the building back. However, him being so big kind of caused him to run out of air super fast, so he's like, I'm gonna take a nap, and falls into the ocean. Wasp goes in there. Also, Ghost steals the building. She enlarges it in the middle of the city, so potentially people are dead. She goes inside in order to heal herself. However, Wasp goes down to Ant-Man, fixes him up. They go into the building in order to fight against Ghost, in order to stop her from, well, killing Mom. And they do it long enough and almost get killed by the whole vehicle returning from the quantum realm thing. But everyone is back, and then Janet puts her fingers on Ghost's head and fixes her, and that was my problem with the movie. And there you go. Everything is all happy except for the fact that, you know, Ant-Man was here. So we need another big distraction. So they enlarge the suit so that Scott can leave in order to go back home. So once again, the whole magic trick thing. And they go to his house. Apparently, he has been home the entire time. The monitor gets taken off the ankle, and he's a free man, baby. Yes, he did it. And the first thing he does, he heads over to his daughter. And also, while that happened, the bad guys actually got taken out by the other two from the Squad, whose name I forgot. And that actually allowed the company to get promotion, which I thought was actually funny. And also, they injected the bad guys with truth serum, and it's like, yeah, I'm just a bad guy, you know, I've done so many bad things, it's just horrible. So they admit it all. But yeah, so the business is booming. We have Scott back into the world. Fantastic. Hope and Janet are like on an island somewhere with a giant building that they have in their pocket in that sense. And that's it. Everything is fine. And that's the end of the movie, basically. And then in the mid-credit scene, we we have the fact that apparently we need to get energy for Ghost in the quantum realm, which I thought Janet fixed her, but whatever. So Scott goes into the quantum realm. However, that is when the snap happens, so he can't get out, and that is set up for Endgame. And then to end the movie with the post-credit scene, we have Ant on the drums, baby, and that's the end of the movie. And like I said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny. However, the main problem that I have with this movie is the fact that it's just like too much going on for an Ant-Man movie. The thing about an Ant-Man movie is you need to keep the plot simple, and they didn't do that. They had too many characters in the movie because it wouldn't otherwise make sense. You know, we want to do the Ghost storyline. That is the main storyline of the movie, but we also want to have car chases and car flips. We can't do that with the FBI, so we have to do that with like the other bad guy. But that, in order to do that, we need another bad guy. So that is the big problem with the movie. But outside that, the movie was funny. I very much enjoyed my time. So let me know what you guys thought about Ant-Man and the Wasp in the comment section down below. I also like the school joke, by the way. How was school, champ? Thought that was funny too. And with that being said, thank you all so very much for watching, and I hope you guys have enjoyed. And if you did, please like button, subscribe if you have done so already. Turn on notifications. Don't forget to check out the Let's Play channel link in the description and at the end of the video. And I'll see you guys next time, because we are getting so close, dude. We are so close, but we're gonna be going to time travel once again in the MCU. Like I said, this was the time traveling phase. I will just say that, right, or at least, yeah, time traveling phase, because like 3 things wanted to time travel. We have like Runaways, we have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and obviously Infinity War to Endgame. So yeah, but next up, we're gonna be doing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5. At least that's what I'll be doing next. I don't know if that goes up next, but let's cross our fingers. Bye!